Too much good. Stuff down totally. Could be too much good. We can't try.
Crazy, shitty week, but it is what it is, right? You have those.
Right after the holidays too.
Yeah, just wait till you get older. It's not any better, bro. You ready to get this thing started?
Yeah, I'm good. Is this okay, or should I move it somewhere else? Or
no, you're good, man. We're just having fun. We're just talking shit and talking boxing and whatever the fuck happens, right? There you go.
Yeah.
All right, welcome to another episode of Grinds My Gears. I'm gonna butcher your last name, brother. So it's Mathusan, and I'm not even gonna do it because how do you pronounce your last name? Because I butcher it every time. Mahindas. But see, because it's Tamil, when you read it, it's different. You're like, what?
I think I'm lucky. I don't got those super long ass Tamil.
Yeah, like Sivapali Monopoly, like those guys. I've had a few friends with those ones. You're like, there's two. You know, when you're growing up and there's like, they're teaching you syllables and you clap for each syllable. I'm like, to the Tamil community, there's too many syllables in your last name. You gotta short form it. Anyway, how you doing, brother? How's things going? How's the new year kicking off for you?
The new year's been very good so far. I'm just working off the holiday weight. That's every fighter. Every fighter got to do that.
Every person, not just fighter. Every person. So last year was a big year for you too, right? Was it your first year turning professional? And I mean, I've known you for quite a while, and you've had an extensive amateur career, right? How many fights amateur do you have total?
Somewhere in the 80s. I literally lost count. Maybe like 80, 85.
Yeah.
80, somewhere between 80 and, somewhere between 80 and 85, somewhere in there.
Now, why so long?
You gotta make sure you have it right before you turn pro, You gotta make sure you got all the tools you can before you turn pro, because that's when the record really matters, right? So you gotta get the experience as an amateur before you make that transition.
So was it more of making sure that you were ready that your skill set was ready for pro, or was it more of like to mentally get you ready to do that many? Because I know that like boxing and like say MMA is a bit different in terms of the physicality and the injuries involved, but some would argue that you're wasting. I wouldn't say wasting, but 80 fights as an amateur, that's a lot of manpower that you could have went towards making money. So what was the methodology that you and your coach had with that extensive kind of amateur career?
Yeah, so I started the sport late, right? Compared to like other people who are like professionals now in boxing. Like I didn't have my first fight until I was already 17 years old. I didn't even lace up a pair of gloves until I was 16, like the later half of 16. I was already like almost 17 by the time I had my first time I even threw a punch.
Yeah.
So for us, especially coming from like a background like that, you definitely have to make sure you're more prepared, because the guys you fight later on in your amateur career and like at the top levels as a pro are the guys who've been fighting since they're like in the crib.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah.
You gotta be able to bang with those guys before you make that transition to the amateur. Make that transition to the pros. So that's what me and Horace were always looking at. Like even as an amateur, we knew to like we were looking at the pro scene, not like my whole amateur career was just grooming me to become a better professional.
So it wasn't really that you were like aiming for Olympic level boxing or anything like that. It was more of like turning pro was always the goal, but you were kind of just making sure that you've seen all the styles and the things you want to see before you make that jump into the ship, right?
Exactly. You got it, hit it right on the nail. So that's exactly it. But also, like, I wouldn't say I wasn't trying to not go to the Olympics. Like, I was still making an effort to try to see what I could do in terms of that Olympic route.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the best fighters who are boxers on the planet are people who are like Olympians, or like they have that pedigree of amateur.
Yeah.
So it's important you're able to like stand with those guys before you really make a push for the pros.
But let's be honest though, Olympic boxing now is so corrupt. It almost doesn't like as a young fighter like dreaming of winning the Olympics, and especially if you're from North America, right? Because we've seen this time and time again where North American fighters, especially good Americans, um, they will probably not. I forgot the fight it was. It was a couple Olympics ago, but one of the guys knocked the guy down like 5 times, and they gave the other guy the decision. And when you see those kind of things, like if you're aspiring to win an Olympic medal, you're like, well, it's almost impossible to work around that kind of corruption, right?
Yeah, so that's the corruption you just see on TV on at the
Oh,
Olympic Games.
I know there's more. I know there's more. I know there's more.
Just on the way, on the way to the Olympics, you don't know how many people are getting robbed at the not like the state level Golden Gloves, or like
Yeah.
just like in your own backyard, you're like getting robbed. So you don't even get a chance to like show what you got on that level because you're getting robbed on like the provincial level or like your city level. So it's
Yeah.
like it's terrible. Like it's very big, the corruption.
I wanted to talk about this later, but we might as well because we float into it now. Why is that? Like, how has that became like? I can understand at the professional level, like a bullshit decision to protect a guy, and and for money when when we're talking like Wilder and those kind of guys, when we're talking about big millions of dollars with Tyson Fury, etc. But on the amateur level, there's not really much money involved. So why is what's sparking the the corruption in terms of the judging and that kind of stuff? Because when we think about all the evil shit that goes on in the world, it's mostly money driven, right? But when you're looking at amateur boxing, there's not much money driven behind it. So like as a guy on the inside, so like because I'm from the MMA realm, so I see the corruption in that area. How is it beneficial to someone to like give a phony decision or something like that?
So you wouldn't believe it, but in the amateurs, it's also about the same thing. It's about money, man. Like it's about like basically in let's say you're on the national team, like
Yeah,
the funding that you get is based upon like your win loss ratio and like locating to certain provinces because certain provinces have like well for in Canada it's like Quebec, right? Like Quebec runs
yeah,
boxing
yeah.
in Canada. So because of like things like that, it's like they try to keep the money in Quebec. They try to keep all the like the Olympic training centers in Quebec. So they try to send all the boxers from across Canada to Quebec. They try to keep it very in there. Like it's all
Those damn Frenchies, man. No, we love them, but yeah. No, I get what you're
no,
saying.
but like they're doing like there's corruption in terms of that, but it's also at the same time you can't say that about the Frenchies in boxing because at the end of the day the other provinces aren't putting up the money to like to be
Do
able
it,
to
yeah,
so like all the fights like even like professional kickboxing and everything that was all banned in Ontario for so long
yeah, for
and
sure.
only so it's like the Montreal culture, they got a fight culture, so they're kind of allowed to call the shots, but
Yeah, and the big organization out there, TKO, they kind of made a comeback for MMA, and then they kind of fell off a little bit. But they had some of the most stupid contracts that were like so like uh they approached me once. I didn't fight for them, but I had a couple buddies who did fight for them. There was something in the contract that was so silly that if you were under contract with TKO and say the UFC said called you up and offered you, you had to pay them like a portion of that purse. Like it was ridiculous that that was even there. And guys want to compete, so they sign those contracts, and then you're like, fuck, like it's kind of like it's very restrictive. But then what are you going to do? There's not much shows elsewhere. You know what I mean? In Canada, it's very limited. Did you find that like with your amateur career? I know you and Horace would constantly go out to Nova Scotia and different kind of things. But did you find that uh, finding quality and good shows was kind of limited, or like it was a lot of like gym kind of shows and that kind of stuff, right? In the amateur rankings.
uh, and yeah, and the amateurs I feel like I'm Canada actually had a like because we're so close to Montreal, like for club shows and stuff, we would like travel, like we would get like we would do club shows in Ontario, but then we were willing to travel. Like I fought in like New York a bunch of times. I fought
Yeah,
in Michigan. And we went to Montreal to fight. I've been flown out to like Alberta even to fight. So like I'm lucky where like I got to be able to be a traveling fighter. Like I got to go to other states and fight the best person at like each state and
Yeah,
province, and yeah, I got fortunate to have like a good amateur career like that. But definitely, if your like coach isn't willing to put in like the time to like spend time away
travel.
from his family to
Yeah,
travel, and it's just you're losing a lot of money. Like you to buy the hotel in the next city just to fight for free.
yeah.
It's a big investment. So I could
Well,
definitely see it's tough.
that's one thing people don't keep in mind is the coaches, and that's the like my my old coach. He stopped coaching. He retired from professional coaching, but one of the things people don't realize is like when he was traveling with us on the roads to these fights every weekend with all different fighters, uh, he's not at his gym running his gym. And
Yeah.
then when he's not at his gym running his gym, that means he's paying somebody money to run his gym, which means he's losing money because let's be honest, a professional fight purse is at 10% on if you're under 10 fights is peanuts. It's like $100. Or like why would I travel 17 hours with you back and forth for $100, right? So like we
Mm.
have to give tons of props to all coaches at all levels, but especially boxing and MMA because those time away on those weekends, they're losing a significant amount of money. They're not making money unless your fighter is fighting pay per view cards and is getting a chunk of the pay per view. Most coaches don't make that much, right?
No, they're definitely losing money to bring you out to the fight.
Yeah,
And that's why you gotta like really respect your coach. And that's why like anytime I go out with my coach, I'm like, yo, I gotta, like I'm fighting for gas money. Like that's how I literally feel. I'm like
yeah,
I'm fighting this guy for the gas money my coach spent to get me here. So like we
yeah,
gotta rumble.
yeah. I know. Now that you turn pro, 4-0 or 3-0, 4-0, right?
4-0 now.
Yeah, 4-0. Now that you're getting a little bit return on your investment, I mean, I know the struggle. I know it's not a big return, but how does it feel? It's barely a return. It's still probably when you work out your expenses, it's still probably net negative, 100%. But how does it feel like to make that transition now, where like you're leaving the arena and there's some sort of monetary kind of gain that you're getting from it.
I don't really care about the money. Like sometimes I forget to even get the check at the end of the fight because I'm so used to. I fought 85 times for
Yeah,
free. I just walk out. The doctor checks me. I'm like, I just walk out. But like
yeah.
I don't. But having to stick around for the check at the end, it's like all right, it's a little sweet. I get to have dinner after.
It's just $30. You can just get some dinner. Yeah. No, but it's gotta have a better feeling than before for sure, right?
Yeah, like at the end of like when they have the victory and you have that post fight meal with your friends and you get to spend the like the money you just won off the fight. Um, so it is a good feeling. It's better. Yeah, it's much better than fighting
For
for
free,
free.
for sure. And like you said, you're not really care about the money. Is that like your mentality going forward with your career, or are you looking to to get bigger fights, build the record up, and eventually make a living and fight professionally full time? Is that something that you're looking forward to, or you really don't care? I know you have a career as well at the side that you do. Do you prefer kind of juggling both, or is your goal kind of just to work your way up into fight professionally full time?
Yeah, my goal is definitely to fight professionally full time because if you really want to get to the top of the top, that's what it takes, right?
Yeah,
And you got to be willing to make that sacrifice and take that risk to do that. At the moment, like I'm able to do what I'm doing, like juggling it both at the same time.
yeah.
But definitely, like I like the way this pace I'm going at. I think like in another like within the next year, I might have to take that leap of faith, which I'm prepared to do
Yeah,
because that's what it
yeah,
takes to get there.
and it's difficult, and there will be hardships. Like I'm sure you've seen that graph that like goes around social media, like the little graph where it's like life of a fighter, and it's like a bar graph, and it's like right, the highs and the lows, right? The highs are the very high, and the lows are very low. And like when you make that jump where you go full time, a lot of guys go broke in that time. You have to be willing to do that because you're not always going to be fighting, right? Like you only make money on the night of the fight, and if you're lucky, sponsors pick you up, and but even then, sponsors flake. Those kind of things don't always pay out. So when you do make that leap, you have to really be committed to the fact that, there might be times where I'm not collecting a paycheck for a month or two. Like, how do I balance that out? How do I make sure that my finances are covered? Are you prepared for that when you make that leap?
Yeah, I feel like that's the difference between me and a lot of other fighters. Like I graduated in finance. I'm very smart with my money. I know how to
Yeah.
save, and I'm a very responsible person. I don't see myself having that issue like on my own accord. It wouldn't
You
I
don't
wouldn't
see it,
let it
yeah,
happen.
like having to take a fight when you're not ready or injured just because you need the money, right?
Exactly. Like I wouldn't put myself in that situation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's smart because like a lot of guys do that, and it's actually well, as well as I. You've been around a lot of pros, and a lot of guys they rely on that money, right? Especially when they're
Yeah.
very fresh in their career. Like it's very dangerous thing where you're not say like for example, because I know how the pay goes. Say you're like making $800 a fight, which is nothing, and you rely on that. That is a rough life to live. To like be relying on that one little tiny paycheck for one night. You know what I mean. And the amount of stress it puts on you, on top of the fact that you have to go in there into this dangerous situation, get punched in the face, and then you're also thinking about, well, if I don't win, because sometimes I don't know how boxing contract works. Do they do win bonuses for boxing as well?
No, they don't have win bonuses. Actually, that's crazy. That only I think only like MMA does that, like the
Yeah,
win bonus.
it's
And they
fucking
have like
stupid.
a
I
knockout
hate
of
it.
the night. And
I
yeah,
hate
they should just
not
pay They should just divide that between whoever is left and just make sure everyone's on a better spot. But I don't know.
the win bonus thing is bonkers. It's so stupid because it's like, oh, it's an incentive to win. Like, what the fuck do you think I'm doing? Of course I'm trying to win, you retard. Like, I'm in a fist fight. Like, I'm trying to win. But like, so in boxing, most of the contracts are base pay, correct? And then maybe some sort of incentives in terms of selling tickets, etc. Right?
Yeah, like pay-per-view buys or ticket sales, exactly. But plus like the base pay.
Yeah. Now, as you transition from amateur to pro, how did training change? Did you train much, or like because you've had such an extensive amateur career, not much had to be done training in terms of the transition?
I would say I had to turn up like the number of sessions, and I had to make my life outside of the more like more fit for what's gonna happen as a pro. Because when I was in amateurs, like I was doing things like I wasn't taking my nutrition seriously.
Yeah,
Um, I wouldn't sometimes you don't train twice a day as much as you need to. Like you might run in the morning, but you won't do that like the leg day in the morning followed by like something at lunchtime and then doing the next like you won't have multiple training
yeah,
sessions all the
yeah,
time.
yeah. I know what you mean. So,
You gotta commit to training a lot more, and definitely things like getting sleep every night. I think that was like I used to stay up and talk to my girlfriend. Now I'm like, yo, I gotta fight somebody.
yeah, I go to bed. Yeah. Now, how do you split up your training now in terms of like technical skill, strength and conditioning, sparring? Like, is there a balance that you guys have found throughout your amateur career that's working so far as pro, or are you still kind of trying to figure out the right recipe for yourself?
I think it's an ongoing process. Like I make some changes, and I find like I'm like, oh, this I do react better to this, so I kind of stick to this. And or if like I feel like in my last couple fights I was lacking on a couple things.
Yeah,
So I was like, you know what, I have to go back to the drawing board and spend more time to fix these areas in order to progress better. So then maybe I step back on things that I was doing more of and saying, you know what, I'm already good at that. I don't need to do that anymore, or I don't need to do as much of it.
yeah,
Let me work on these other areas because it's better. I feel like it's better to be well rounded as a professional than it is to be very good at one thing, because
yeah,
some in the professionals
yeah.
people
I know
will
what you mean.
game plan for you, and they'll they'll try to fight around your strengths and weaknesses more.
Well, one of the things I found is I got into the pro game, and then I've had this break now because of COVID and injuries. But as I coming back into it, is like if you're very one dimensional, it's very easy for other fighters to set a trap on you and exploit that one kind of area. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
what I've found, and this is my experience, but yours might be different. Is like as the level of competition increases, it's no longer kind of like standing in front of each other and seeing who's got a better skill set, because it's almost like the guy across from you, like he might have a really good record, but he might not be the better fighter. But he's actually super intelligent. He kind of sets traps and gets you to be in positions where you genuinely never are in when you train or when you fight. But he kind of makes you go there, makes you take a step outside of your you extend your base, your legs too far, and all of a sudden it kind of exposes an angle and he hits that shot. You know what I mean? Do you find like as you're getting these more pro fights in, that's something that you're an element that you're adding to the game? Because I find a lot of veterans, you know how like when their athletic prowess kind of calms down, like they've had tons of fights and they're like, I'm not as good as an athlete anymore, but I'm smarter than the other guy. Do you find that you've kind of adopted that a little bit early on?
I felt like I that's exactly how I feel now. Like I can definitely say I'm not as quick as I was like 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like compared to like when I was like 21, 22 years old. But now I'm hell of a lot stronger and I'm hell of a lot smarter. So I can like set them up for like a one punch instead of like before I wouldn't be trying to even try. I wouldn't even be thinking of that. I would just be throwing punches to throw punches or like, just trying to outwork them. But now it's like I got to take my time, like lull them and then catch them with something they don't expect.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see in the pro game because I guess it's also because in the pro game everyone's a good big strong man now. It's
Yeah.
not like you're fighting other kids your age and like in the amateurs and with the small gloves and stuff. Now it's like things. It's like really the hurt game. Those gloves are small. If you mess up once, you can get
Yeah.
you can get knocked out. You can get hurt bad.
You're how old now? 20, 24, 25?
Uh, I'm 26
26.
right now.
Yeah. So like for me, like when I turned 30, one of the things that like I fucking hated the number, right? I'm like, oh no, I'm 30, I'm getting old. But the one of the things that I noticed was like that's when I was starting to get my man strength, right? And I didn't have to like when you're fighting and you kind of overcompensate, like for like say you're tired, so you use strength to kind of get yourself out of different kind of situations that like normally you could use technique, but you're like fuck it, I'm gonna use strength. You know what I mean? Like kind of barbarian your way out of a corner. You know what I mean? Like out of a flurry or something like that. But what I noticed was like when I was hitting that 29, 30, like strength came a lot easier to me than was in my early 20s, right? So that's something like you're good at, like fighters, young fighters especially, have to keep in mind as they move up the ranks because you're going to end up fighting 31-year-olds, 32-year-olds who have good records, and they're going to be really fucking strong. Like it's good, and you can lift as many weights as you want to or whatever, but it's physiological, right? And you're gonna get to that point too, where you're gonna get that strength. But is that something you're keeping in mind as you kind of guys pick your matchups and take fights and accept fights, like that kind of strength difference when it comes to older kind of guys, older fighters?
I wouldn't say that. Like we just take the matchup like whatever comes. We're not like like we're not like looking too into it or anything. We're just trying to like put ourselves in a situation where like we're not gonna get robbed or something like that. We're
Yeah,
like as long as it's a fair fight, we'll take the fight. But if it's like one of those ones like you got to travel to that guy's backyard and
yeah,
his
I've
whole
done that.
family's there, and then yeah, those are the
I've
ones
done
you got to
I've
stick away from.
I've done that. I've done that. I fought in Ohio and it was like in a fucking barnyard. Like it was like a shitty venue. And everybody there just like wanted you to lose because it's that guy's hometown, right? And I remember going into the third and the last round, my coach was like, "You won those 2 rounds, but you have to finish them in this round." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because I have a feeling after watching the earlier fights on the card that they would have scored it for him." So I was like, "Fuck, okay." And I ended up going out and finishing the guy. But like, I know what you mean. Like when you're in that backyard and you're at the home, if there's any doubt, you're probably gonna lose that decision. You're probably gonna get robbed in that sense, and in some ways more so in boxing than in other sports because of the bullshit that goes along with it, right?
Yeah, like I like if it's a fair fight and I lost the fight and I like lost legit. All right, like I can go back to the drawing board and I'll come back stronger.
Yeah,
If like to do what you got to do and like you won every round and like to not get the decision at the end, it makes no sense. Especially coming from like 3 judges or 4 judges who like never threw a punch in their life. They're just sitting on the side, and
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know.
man, this is like they shouldn't have control over your fate like that. Like that's just
Well,
crazy to me.
and I'm sure you've seen it in boxing and in MMA where like that bad decision, like you watch the guy's career develop after that bad decision, and you're like, well, if he had gotten that decision that he should have, his career would have went in a totally different trajectory, and he would have been world champion, or he would have been like top contender for the next 10 years. Whereas he had that one bad decision, and then they didn't give him the next fight, and then he ended up losing another fight, and then all of a sudden you're like, what the fuck? The guy's a nobody anymore. But it was everything kind of stemmed from that one bad decision. You know what I mean? And that
Yeah,
affects your income too, right? That affects your income. You're robbing
yeah,
guys.
that's another. Yeah, because as soon as you lose a fight, all your minimums are down. No promoter wants you. Nobody wants you anymore. So, and that's kind of like Floyd Mayweather, especially in boxing compared to MMA.
Yeah,
Like they want that clean Floyd Mayweather 50-0 record, but
yeah,
that's why I respect MMA. Like those guys, like you see the top guy fight each other on the UFC. They'll lose and then they'll come with the rematch like another 1 year later, and I respect that. Like having the greatest fighters fight each other and having losses to each other doesn't matter.
yeah. I mean, you've done amateur a long time, and you've lost fights. You know that like you don't really learn much from winning, right? It feels great, and you're like, okay, you go back to the drawing board, you fix on some of the mistakes, but most of the losses, especially my losses, the most I've grown as a man, especially, is like when I was like, fuck, I lost that fight. What do I do? You're like, I'm a loser. Everyone's gonna make fun of me, and really nobody cares, right? Because even when you win or lose, what's the one question everyone asks you? When's your next fight? Right? Like, hey, like I just got the fuck out of there. Like, give me a day or two. You know what I mean? But like, no, like at the end of the day, like I think it's a common thing with fighters where they think that the whole world gives a fuck, when really
Yeah,
nobody gives a fuck. You know what I mean?
that's exactly how that's my new like that's the mindset I kind of took on. Like at the end of the day, there's 50, what is it, like 5 billion people in the world. You're just
Yeah,
one person. Like the world goes on regardless, win, lose or draw.
yeah,
You gotta
exactly.
just keep hacking away at it. And it's funny
And
because today we were in the gym and some guys were sparring, and then
yeah,
this one guy's complaining. He's like, "Man, I work at McDonald's 3 to 11. I couldn't come to the gym for the last week, like to train." And then he gassed out in sparring, right? And
yeah,
then the guy outside, he's like, "Guess what? No one cares, and your
yeah.
opponent doesn't care either."
Yeah,
So
exactly. And I mean, but that's people though. Like people always kind of look for an excuse as to why they can't perform or to do anything. Like it's not necessarily boxing or sport, right? It's like,
mm,
oh, I had this, and this factor. That's why I can't. Like take something simple like eating healthy and exercising. I can't exercise because I work a 9 to 5 and I have kids, and then I gotta go home and make dinner. Well, bitch, please. You know how many fucking people have to do that kind of shit? They still like 30 minutes. Like wake up early, stay up late, like make us like. I'm sure you've seen me on social, or even when I sometimes when you pop into the gym when I was there, like I take my kids to the gym. Like I don't care. Like if something means that much to you, like if a goal that you have in life means that much to you, it shouldn't matter about the circumstances that are behind you. And how many times, especially in boxing, we see like some of the best guys come from some of the worst places on the fucking planet. You know what I mean? Like they come from the roughest, crappiest upbringing. And you're like, you think they made an excuse? Like they didn't have a gym. Like some of these guys are coming and they're like, you look at some of the best boxing programs, like Cuban boxing pro, like they don't have fucking full gyms with 20,000 bags and air conditioning and shit. No, these guys are boxing in the mud. You know what I mean?
they're
It,
like they don't even have heavy bags. They're just punching tires with like
yeah,
no with like their gloves have no padding. Like they're just working with what they got.
and it's a common thing. Like I feel like it's like a North American or a first world country kind of problem where like people make those excuses, and like fighters make those excuses, athletes and all kind of sports make that excuses, like, oh, that guy's better than me because he has X amount of resources, or he has sponsors paying for him. Like who cares? At the end of the day, it's about the effort you put in, right? And nobody can judge effort, right? Like wins and losses come and go, but effort, nobody can judge that, right? So if you put in the effort, whether or not you win or lose, people will see the hard work. People will see the skills, and you will get somewhere. But it's a fact that, like you said, like, oh, I worked at McDonald's all day and I couldn't come to the gym. Whose fault is that? It doesn't matter if you could have get to the gym. Why didn't you shadow box in your room when you got home? Why don't you do something to get better? You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's a
exactly.
constant. It's a constant. Like, I'm sure you see it all the time in the gyms, right?
And you know what? Ever since I turned pro, I fought a few people from Mexico, right?
Yeah,
And I could really see the difference in hunger between fighting one of those fighters and like my whole amateur career fighting like North American fighters or like
yeah.
a couple South American fighters. But like when those guys come to fight, like they're really coming to like they're putting it all on the line. Like they're not just coming to box you or thing. They're coming to like legit kill you. Like they're
Yeah.
just coming in swinging as hard as they can. They have nothing to lose. So I feel like you got to have like that kind of hunger to be even stay on the level as those guys. It's because if
Well,
you're not coming with that level of hunger, you're gonna get like taken out.
you're gonna get taken out. And if you look at some of the better fighters in boxing and MMA are coming from, they're coming from Europe and like Russia and those kind of parts of the world. Those guys are hard fucking human beings, bro. Like, they don't care. Like, they don't care about
No.
your well being. Like, they're very respectful when you fight. They shake hands, whatever. But like, they don't care. They don't care about the circumstances. They just care about getting to the fucking fight and winning and destroying you. And like, when you're done and when you're knocked out and when you wake up, yeah, sure, shake your hand. But like, they don't give a flying fuck about anything between that time. I think that's one of the difference between like some of those overseas fighters compared to North American fighters is like some of the environments they grow up in. It makes them really hardened. You know what I mean?
Hmm. I can, yeah, that's 1000% it. I can
Uh,
see that.
I even find that too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong on this, but I find that too, where when you fight guys from like colder climates, they're a lot harder kind of individuals, right? I don't say that like people who live in Florida or fucking south of the equator like don't fight well. I mean, like, when you have to like pick your ass up through like -30 to train and kind of stuff, there's a different kind of grit that kind of brings out in a kind of fighter. So I find like sometimes when I have to compete against somebody who comes from a weird kind of climate and a kind of country like that, even kind of like Canadians get that rap. Like, we're tough because half of the year we're cold as fuck, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
You know what? I do things like that in my own training. Like I throw a monkey wrench in my own training just to show myself like I can push through this. Like I'll run through like a blizzard or
Yeah,
like like those days, those days in the summers are like, yo, it's a heat warning. It's like 35 degrees. Like
yeah.
you legit get a
I'll
sunstroke.
I'll train
That's
on
when,
those. Yeah.
yeah, that's when I run 10 miles just to prove I could do it.
Yeah, those days where it's like those days where it's 40, like, I don't know why I do this, but those are the days where like I'll go to jujitsu and I'll go to gi class and I'll put on the gi and I'll be like, yo, I want to see how much I can sweat before I cramp. Like, I want to see what level of heat I can, because like I know you don't grapple, but like when you're wearing the gi in like 40-degree heat, and then like say someone like pulls it over your face, and then you're sweating, but then the material is keeping the sweat there, like the heat in there, and like they're on top of you, and you're like it's hot. You're not thinking about the position. You're just thinking about like, I need to like get to like a where there's some fucking air, where there's breathe. You know what I mean? It's just hot. But it's weird because like you said, I put myself in those situations. Like, I don't have to do that day. I could be like going to do boxing or kickboxing, but I'm like, what's the shittiest thing I can do today to punish myself? I'm so stupid.
Yeah, that it's I don't know. I think that's an important part of training, being able to be in those like that type of environment and like put like especially putting yourself in it. Like not no one's telling you you have to do this. Like you're like saying like, you know what? I know this is like something crazy that I'm about to do, but I'm just gonna do it
Yeah.
and show that and prove to myself that I could survive it and do what
Now,
you set for. Like, yeah.
yeah. Now, with the craziness, obviously recovery is key, and I think that as the sport evolves, combat sport evolves, I think more athletes are kind of getting in tune with recovery, right? Because
Mm,
I'm very open. My one of my tragic flaws and why I've had so many injuries is because I just beat myself into the ground, and then one day something pops, and then I'm out for 6 months. That's been my tragic flaw. Um, and I like to share that experience because I don't want anybody else to kind of go through that. I want people to learn from my mistakes, and I'm not the only one to make that mistake. I know every fighter trains more than they should, right? What now that you've made this transition to pro, have you done anything more to kind of help with recovery and kind of getting between training sessions? Obviously, you talked about nutrition, you're honing in on your food and stuff. Is there any kind of things you're doing like sauna, baths, ice to kind of aid with the recovery so that you are able to keep up with that demanding training?
Yeah, I think that's one of my issues. Like, I feel like ever since I changed up the nutrition and like in between training sessions, getting in good food and like not doing anything too crazy in between training sessions to recover for the next one, I'm on top of. But I
Yeah,
need to do more things like massage or like like a sauna or like I need
yeah.
to incorporate and that's definitely I got to look into maybe some yoga. Um, yeah, that's definitely gonna.
Yoga's key. Like I've done a lot of yoga because of the different injuries I've had. But one of the things I like, I know a lot of people do cold therapy, right? But like, I'm brown as shit. Like I hate cold. I hate cold. So like when I watch those guys like jump in like an ice bath and they film it and they're all like, it makes me tougher. I'm like, yeah, fuck that. I'm tough. I'm not gonna do that. Like I'm more of a heat kind of therapy guy. Like I will be the first to jump in the sauna. I'll be the first to jump in the hot tub. That's kind of what makes me more comfortable. Do you have a kind of a preference this kind of far in your career of how you kind of like to recover? Like,
I've been sticking to more of the heat stuff, but that's only because the cold stuff's harder to get to.
okay,
Um,
yeah,
but now in the winter, I'm thinking like maybe because I used to do this when we were on the basketball team. We used to like after practice, the
jump
coach
in the
would make
snow.
us all, yeah, he would make us all jump in the snow for like 5 minutes and then come back out.
Yeah,
So I was thinking about I got to start doing those old school things we used to do in like high school basketball practice and stuff. But
yeah. Now I wanted to jump on this topic because I love talking to boxers about this because this YouTube boxing phenomenon, right? Uh, and I specifically wanted to ask you about this because I know how much work you put in as an amateur and what it means to you to turn pro and to finally reach this level, and then to see these fucking guys who like I respect the hustle. I respect what the making money and taking advantage of situations. But what we're looking at now is people who are on YouTube in like this influencer bullshit, and all of a sudden everybody's a fucking fighter. Everybody's a boxer, right? And we're gonna take. I'm gonna take Jake Paul for a good example. Now, I do think he has some skills, but I think
mhm.
that for what his skill set is, it's not. He hasn't. He's not a boxer. Like when I look at you, and when I look at guys like Sook and other guys from around the GTA, like those guys to me are boxers. You're a boxer. When I look at Jake Paul, I'm like, okay, he's an athlete, maybe, right? Like, does it bug you to kind of see this phenomenon of guys just like saying, "Oh yeah, let's just box," because it's almost like they feel like it's so easy. Let's just box, right?
Yeah. Um, at first I didn't like it because they were like far too showy with it, and back then like he looked very bad like when he was doing like the first early fights in his career. But
Yeah,
I do give him his respect. Like I feel like he's gotten a lot better in like a short amount of time. So I think he has like spent the time in the gym to like hone his craft. And of course, he doesn't have like an amateur career and stuff. So he's gonna look shaky in the fights because if you don't develop that as an amateur, it's hard to get better like within fights if you're only fighting pro fights once every year.
yeah, I know what I mean.
Um,
Yeah,
but like the attention it's bringing to boxing, I can't not like it because it just puts like now people are getting like career high paydays. This is like the most millionaires in boxing that there's ever been. Um, like it might look bad like for like like let's say you're an amateur and you had 80 fights and you're not making money like these guys, but overall as a sport and as a whole, it's bringing a lot of attention to it, and I think overall it will pay dividends down the line. But
do
like in
you,
another like little kids now, like they don't even know who like other people are, but they know who Jake Paul is. And like kids in my gym, they started boxing because of like the influencer boxers, because of like Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia and Jake Paul and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's bringing money into my gym. Like a lot of people have signed up because of like how much it's grown the sport. So
Yeah.
I can't be that mad at it. Like overall, I love boxing as a sport, and I think everyone should like do some sort of combat sport in their life just to like have it. It's like a good for like mental preparation for everybody. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I've come to become okay.
You've come to terms with it. Now, my question is: do you think that it diminishes the skill from the sport? Because, like, when I look at, I don't even want to call it by that, but like, I don't know his real name, that KSI guy. Like, there's no to me, like, there's no skill set. You know what I mean? There's no style. Like when you spend time working on a striking art, specifically boxing or kickboxing, you develop style. When a fighter comes out, you know what kind of style they bring to it. Like if you're Lomachenko's fighting, you know it's going to be footwork. If Canelo's fighting, you know it's going to be movement, power, precision. Now with these guys coming into the sport, they don't have that kind of that ability. They don't have styles. They don't really. They're just athletes, and I wouldn't even call them boxers yet, right? Because to me, well, a fight like an MMA fighter is an MMA fighter when you step in the cage and you can discern like, okay, that guy is a jiu-jitsu guy. That guy is a wrestler. They bring a specific style. Like when a boxer steps in the ring, you know, okay, this guy is a footwork guy. He's gonna dance around you and jab you all day until your face fucking opens up, and then a right hand's gonna come from hell from nowhere. Or you're gonna get a guy who's a bruiser. He's gonna step in on you, cut the ring off, and he's gonna put you on the ropes and beat the fuck out of you. Like, so my concern is it's like, yes, it's bringing more eyeballs in, yes to that, but in the long run, do you think that because they're not bringing specific styles to fights, it's going to kind of diminish the skill set that's coming that has been in boxing before?
I think that's hard to say because I think the skill sets come from teachers in boxing. Like I'm lucky I have a good like my coach. He's my coach, but he's also a teacher because he
Yeah.
taught me. He didn't just teach me how to like throw punches. He taught me how to like think in the ring. He taught me like what you accept in the ring, what you don't accept in the ring.
Yeah.
So those skills I feel like are made by teachers, and then having more people in the sport, it's like are they being taught well? Like are they just learning from the LA Fitness guy holding pads for people? Or
Yeah.
are they learning from somebody who's done it before? Or if not that they've done it before, they're a person who's been in the gym under the tutelage of a person who's done it before. And they're like, knowledge has to be passed on correctly. And I feel like that's where skills either get honed or lost.
Yeah. And so, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you because it really depends on, the coaching and stuff like that. Uh, but I think what I'm trying to really get at is by taking guys that don't put in the work and don't have the amateur career, and then pushing them into the professional ranks. Do you think like, look, now you're gonna have 1-0, 2-0, three fight, 4 fight fighters who don't really have that experience, don't really show that skill set that say a fighter that like you that has that experience. Then over time, it kind of diminishes that early stage of professional fighting. You know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying? That's where I feel it's kind of going, and that's my only concern because I don't really care that they're doing it. I like the fact that guys are making money and more eyeballs are on all combat sports, but I feel like when you look at like guys with the limited amount of fights, under 10 fights, for example, you you really those guys have a diminished skill set coming in, and if over a longer period of time, if that becomes the standard, then you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. So like it's like the kids who are coming into the gym, like the people that they're seeing who they think is on top aren't like the masters of the sport. They're like guys
Yeah.
who are like 5-10 fights, and that's what they think is the top echelon because they see it on TV.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that being an issue. Like kids might see that and think like, oh, like that you could just throw punches like that and
And get away with it, right?
and get away with it exactly. But I think as long as those kids end up in a boxing gym, I think it'll all sort itself out. Like I think
Yeah.
it'll end
You
up being fixed.
you always get exposed. At the end of the day, you always get
Yeah,
exposed. Bad technique always gets exposed. It doesn't matter who you are.
yeah, and that's why when you were saying like some guys will become 3-0, 4-0, like without being actually good, I'm like I'm thankful. I'm like, yo, that means there's more blood for me to to get
there's more tickets to sell on that
that
one. Bigger,
that's
bigger payday, right?
that's more records for me to pad. Like, oh, this guy's 10-0. I defeated a 10-0 fighter.
Now, when you say that, because I know that that does happen. Like, do you think a lot of guys pad their records, and then when they have to actually fight a fucking wolf, they're not ready for it?
It happens a lot more than you think. Like,
Yeah,
I've seen it. I've seen it happen I've seen it happen more times than I ever thought. Like even when I was coming up as an amateur, like
yeah.
I remember sparring somebody and I'm like, holy crap, this guy's like 12-0. I'm gonna spar this guy tomorrow. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this is gonna be like, you're not that you're scared, but you're like, yo, like this is gonna be like you're gonna find out. And then like you go through it and you're like, man, that was so easy. That guy was easier than like
Some other
some of
guys that, yeah, yeah, and I've had that experience too with guys that fight in the UFC or big kind of organizations. I'll get in the gym and they'll like shake my hand, be like, "Yeah, you want to go?" I'm like, "Oh shit, this guy's in the UFC." And then like the first like 3 or 4 seconds, you're kind of trying to feel it out and get the movement, and then about 20, 30 seconds in, you start landing that first combo, and then you land another. You're like, "Wow, maybe I'm not as either he's bad or maybe I'm not as bad as I think." You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And one of the things when you transition to pro, did you notice that there's a faster speed to the sport from amateur to pro, or do you think it's the same?
I think it seems almost slowed down because I think because of the size of the gloves, you kind of have to pace the fight a little slower, and like how long the rounds are. Like if
Yeah,
you especially fight like when you fight the longer fights, like 8 round, 10 round, 12,
yeah,
you can't in the amateurs. It's just 3 minutes, 3 rounds, with smaller gloves, so it's just go or not smaller gloves, but more padded gloves. So
and
it's
it's
just go go go.
sometimes it's 2 minutes too, right?
Yeah, especially the first 10 fights as an amateur, you have 2 minute rounds, and then it becomes 3 minute rounds after 10 plus fights.
Yeah, and that's a
But
fucking sprint. Like 2 minute rounds are retarded. like,
two,
like
yeah, two. I've lost fights like in the 2 minute rounds where like a guy just kept punching nonstop, like kept 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, like the whole fight, and like I ended up
not
losing.
yeah, not even landing a clean shot. It was just to look more active than it had to be, right?
Exactly, like they reward activity a lot more in the amateurs compared to the professionals. Like professionals, they just land like clean punches landed basically.
Yeah, and from this is my experience, and like because I know like there's this big fucking crossover shit where all these MMA boxers want to fight MMA guys and MMA guys want to fight boxers, which I think is fucking dumb because it's two different fucking sports, right? Because I have, for example, I box well for MMA, but I don't box well for boxing, and it's quite evident when I'm training at Grants and like I step in the ring with a guy like Sook, right? I'll be like boxing, and the first couple of seconds I'll get things off, but there's a fluency to boxing. There's a fluency to professional boxers that they have where there's I would say like other combat sport athletes, there's a delayed reaction when they kind of see a hole, they kind of like wind up or their hips are not in the right position. But when you get to the pro level of boxing, there's a fluency. Like, you know what I'm saying? When like a guy touches you like 10 times, you're like, fuck, I didn't see one of those things. And they're not hard shots. They're, just, they're constantly touching you. And then it's almost like you can't see. And then boom, that one shot that comes in. And it's not a fucking haymaker shot. It's a clean right hand. And for me as a outsider looking in, that's how I see the difference. Because I do spar with a lot of boxers, when I spar with them, I'm rarely ever winning rounds, and I'm okay with that because I have no ego, right? But
Mhm.
my clear different the difference I see is like there's a very different fluency to a professional boxer than what I would say I'm an amateur boxer because I don't box, right? I'm a professional MMA fighter, but I would classify my skill set as an amateur boxer, right? But do you
Mhm.
think that do you agree with me on that sense where the difference between the two is like a really good professional boxer will touch you so much, and the like the fluency of the punches is just on a different level.
Yeah, I would say that's the difference between like a very high level boxer versus when you're an amateur and still coming up. It's definitely like when we punch, like especially when you get very good, you punch without having any tells. Like you won't have like an elbow stick up that a guy will
Yeah,
see. You won't like look at them at their body before you throw the punch to the body. You just know how to like mask everything. So like they don't even know they're about to get hit by something like that. They'll just touch you a couple times and then they'll calculate an opening on you and then they'll just let it off very like fluidly without you even knowing it's about to like be there.
yeah,
And that's an important skill set to have. And I think I think some MMA fighters, like when I watch MMA fighters like spar boxing and stuff, I think like when because they do kickboxing and other like arts,
yeah,
it kind of like mixes into the boxing, which is why they don't have that like the fluency to do those things because they kind of have like habits from other sports that they kind
yeah,
of bring in, which is why they have like little flaws in terms of boxing. It's like a flaw, right?
yeah.
Um,
And
but
one
yeah,
of the biggest things I see as a different, and I say this out of the humbleness because I respect boxing so much, is that when guys try to transition from MMA and try to box, the stance is totally different, right? So like when you're fighting Muay Thai or you're fighting kickboxing, you're able to use the legs. You fight in a more extended kind of stance because you're trying to set up kicks, trying to set up knees, those kind of things. When you're boxing and you're in an extended stance and you get that pressure, I find like okay, now you're on your back foot. When you're on your back foot, you're not even you're not dodging, you're not bobbing and weaving, you're not slipping punches when all your weight's on one foot, right? Whereas
mhm,
you can get away with that in kickboxing because if you're all your weight's on your back foot, and you can always front kick a guy to break up the transition. You know what I mean? Or like wrestling, it's a different kind of stance. So I feel like this whole war between like boxers fighting, it's so irrelevant because they're they're two very distinctly different things.
yeah, yeah. It's just two different sports, man. It's like it could be like similar. I guess it's kind of like baseball and cricket or like tennis and badminton. You know, it's like
Of course the brown guy says cricket.
but yeah, it's like it's similar. Yeah, you're both holding a bat, but like the rules are like completely different, and the way you would strike using the bat is different. Like it just has similar characteristics, but yeah, in terms of the skill, and that's why I'm like all these boxers are fighting the MMA fighters. I know if a boxer ever switches to MMA, they're getting tapped out in like two
Oh,
seconds or like
for sure,
it's getting,
for sure. Like I would take the Jake Paul fight in a second. Sign me up. Like, and I wouldn't throw a fucking punch, bro. I'm a black belt. I'm gonna fucking take his ass down, and I'm gonna choke his bitch ass out. Like that. Like, like there's no. I mean, it's more. I don't think you don't see it the other way around, right? Like James Toney was the only guy to do it, and that was an embarrassing, very embarrassing moment because like when you get taken down, it's a whole nother level, right? That's a whole different sport, like you said. Like so, like I don't get it. I don't see why it's doing it. I understand there's money to be made, but I think like it's bad for both sports. I think like it just like when Jake was fighting Teron Woodley, like what 2 times, like I found it was so cringy. The the boxing itself wasn't even good, and you're paying like people are paying money, right? And you're seeing very subpar things, and like we said before, it's great for the sport, puts more eyeballs on it, but at the same time, when I sit down and watch a fight, I want to see two technicians going at it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
In any combat sport, if I want to see a brawl, that's what World Star Hip Hop's for.
Yeah, like you want to see two people who are in the craft want to fight each other, not Joe Blow and the guy who's in the craft, or like you want to see a competitive matchup, or like you want to see if Rock actually beats Scissors that day, or you want those are the things you want to see.
I like that analogy. Now, do you do any cross training, like any other kind of sports to kind of complement? Because I know as myself as an athlete, doing the same kind of thing, the jujitsu, the Muay Thai, the wrestling, sometimes it kind of gets boring. or gets a little too much? Is there any kind of other activities you do like recreationally, kind of take your mind out of the sport for a second for a day, but still stay active, kind of thing?
So I'll play basketball once a while when there's not a fight in sight. But that's the only reason I don't play it too often is because when you're playing basketball and some guy jumps up with his knee
Yeah,
and knees you in the thigh or something, and then you go to training the next day, and you're like, man, this damn that guy who freaking
yeah,
jumped up trying to knee me, or like other than that, I just try to stick to the trainings I do. I try to do more like power lift or not powerlifting, but like like snatches and like
yeah,
I've incorporated more of the like strength type of workouts that I wasn't doing as an amateur as much. So I've done that stuff, but I wouldn't say I haven't taken up another sport. But Horace wants me to start doing wrestling. He's trying to push me to like get into a little bit of wrestling just to be able, because I've noticed in the pros they do fight dirty. Like some people hold you
yeah.
and they're like pulling you and pushing you around, and that's not in the amateurs. You fight very clean because it's not allowed. Like the ref will come in and break that, but in the pros, the refs kind of like let you do all that type of stuff. They let you like hold and punch them and all that crazy stuff. So
Yeah,
I got to start getting into that.
I've had to help a couple pro boxers out with like it's almost like Greco-Roman. It's very upper body wrestling oriented, just working into that clinch and being strong and presence in there. So I agree with Horace on that. I think that would be a great value because I'll say this from experience. It's like there's a big difference when a guy can control your neck. You know what I mean? Even for a split second. Like I know you can't like I know in boxing you can't like pull a guy's neck down like in Muay Thai, but like when a guy can control your posture just by using simple kind of inside controls that aren't illegal in
Hmm.
boxing, which we've seen before. We've seen, that's where the term dirty boxing comes from, right? Guys that fight on the inside and are really good in that clinch position, right? So there is some
Hmm.
value to that. So I do see some value into that, and definitely get incorporated in that. That would definitely, especially at your weight class, if you could if you could incorporate into the game, no guys are gonna want to fight inside. They're gonna always try to fight you on the outside, and then you just beat their ass on the outside too, right?
Exactly. Like I felt like I've always been a good, well-rounded fighter, but I was never a dirty fighter. But I think adding that wrestling element would help with that. So I'm definitely gonna. I think that's my next. That's the next thing I'm trying. I'm gonna add that in yoga for
Yeah.
the next fight, and I think I'll be pretty good for it.
And the one thing I wanted to talk to you about before we wrap this up is safety in boxing. All right. Now,
Yeah.
there's all combat sports have risk, right? Like for example, like MMA is just insane, like on your joints, tendons, etc. But when we're talking about boxing, just specifically boxing, the major intent is to throw shots to the head. And does it ever concern you, like seeing some of the older fighters who are punch drunk, that maybe sometime you have to take a step back or something like that?
Yeah. So I understand. Like I've seen what they've gone through, but I think people in the sport are smarter now than they were in the past. Like those guys were like notorious for sparring like 5 days a week, and they would spar
Yeah,
hard like 3 out of those 5 days. Like, and they would just be taking like too many head blows in training, and I think that's what leads to the long term damage. It's not necessarily. It is the fights too. Like you do take damage in the fights, and that's gonna happen. But I think if you minimize it in training, you're like kind of set up better for the fight too. You won't be as shot going into the fight, and then obviously in your career you've taken less damage throughout training into the fight. So it's very. I think the knowledge of like they're coming out with everything about CTE in football, CTE in boxing, CTE in all the combat sports. So they're being a lot more preventative with it, and I think that's a thing my gym has adopted too. We used to spar 3 days a week. We changed it to 2 days a week, and Horace never lets us spar each other like in the gym, like the fighters in the gym. He never lets us spar each other hard. The only
yeah,
time we go hard sparring is when it's another gym or like another gym comes to us. Then
yeah,
if it's not our guys, then you're allowed to do what you want. But if it's in here, like it has to be controlled.
yeah. And one of the things I found too is when I was especially amateur, I was sparring a lot. I was sparring more than I needed to. And as I got a little bit older, when I figured when I didn't have something booked, when there wasn't anything booked, I didn't spar a lot. And as like right now, I only spar when something's coming up, right? I spend the rest of my kind of time working on the skill sets, working on different drills because sparring is more of you do it because you want to build the live reaction kind of drills, right? So it's like
Mhm.
I've gotten to this point where I don't see that, like, if you just fought, for example, if you fought like last week, you recover, you took a week or two off, then you go back in the gym the first week. I don't see the value in sparring right away. I don't see the value in like I don't see like, and I think that was the old school way of thinking. Like, you get back in the gym, you get your sparring back on track. I find like sparring is something that gets you neurologically ready for the combat that you're about to do. But if the combat you're about to do is not within the next 8 weeks, why the fuck you sparring hard for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you know who does this really well, and I admire them, and it's probably why the sport of Muay Thai has advanced the way it has. Is they do a lot of touching where it's not like they're throwing lots of kicks, they're throwing punches, but none of them are brain trauma kind of punches. Or like one of the things that RG does at Grants is like the body sparring, right? Where you're still getting that reactionary work because that's what sparring is. I think a lot of people think sparring is this thing where you prove if you're a tough guy and you try to win the sparring rounds. Yeah, there's a time and place for that. If you have a fight in 2 weeks and you want to be sharp and you want to be mentally ready, but not really if there's no other value for it, in my opinion, in that sense. But I find like when you do the body sparring, yeah, fuck it, like yeah, hit me as long as I'm not breaking a rib, we're good. You know what I mean? Punches to the chest, punches to the body, working on those reactionary things, working. But I like that's the one thing I hate to see is when guys are sparring and they don't like. I'm like, when's your next fight? Oh, I don't have one booked. Why the fuck are you sparring so hard?
Yeah. And like now people are smart with like the way they taper their camps. Like if they're like 8 weeks out and they're sparring hard on week 8 and 7. And then
Yeah,
like they might like go week 6 and 5 a little easier. Then week 4 they'll go hard one more time, and then that's it. And then they'll like just taper, and then like leading up to the fight they'll just do some technical sparring sessions, make sure the eyes are right. But they don't want to take you don't want to take damage going into the fight like that. There's
yeah.
no point. You want the damage that you take to be in the fight. So that yeah.
For when it
So
counts,
as
for
long
when the money's being made.
yeah
Yeah,
yeah why you losing a bunch of brain cells when there's no like you're not making any money.
and 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 you think that's changing drastically in boxing now throughout the gyms?
Yeah, like especially I noticed Canada's a lot better at that. I noticed the US is still like that though. Like they still spar hard every time. Like they're just trying to kill each other every time they go in there.
Yeah.
But it's like a cultural thing. But I think at the end of the day, like once they realize the damage that it's doing to the fighters, and when they're old and they're gonna pay for it, and then
And they're
I feel like
yeah.
yeah,
It,
it'll
it,
all work its way out, you know?
and one last thing before we kind of wrap it up, do you at this stage in your career and going forward, do you start picking your partners more carefully to avoid kind of injuries or to avoid those kind of ridiculous sparring sessions? Like everything is calculated now. You're not like sparring with buddy boy who comes into the gym. He's only got 6 months of experience and he's throwing wild punches.
Um, I'm the type of guy I'll get in there with anybody, even if they're that person, because I feel like you can learn, you can make yourself in a situation where you can learn out of anybody in front of you, even if there's 6 fights and they're wild and they're throwing punches you wouldn't normally see. Then
Yeah.
that's my opportunity to be like, I got to make this guy miss everything. You know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, there's a certain value to that too, because I'll give you an example of what happened with me once. Is I was sparring with really good guys, UFC level guys, for weeks on end, like all sessions with guys that were really good. And what I noticed towards like I'm getting closer and closer to my fight was like I'm very apprehensive to pull triggers. I'm not setting up shots. I'm not doing things I'm not being creative, right? And
Mhm.
normally you get those things when you go with guys that are less skilled than you because you're more comfortable to pull off those things, try new things, try new footworks, cut new angles. And so, like, I agree with you. There is value to that because this is the only time you really get to work on stuff. You don't get to work on new techniques that Horace and you work on like, with a guy who's like 15-0 as a pro. You get to work
Yeah,
on those. You get to work on those with the amateurs who are 2 and 3, right?
exactly. Like, you got to work on things in sparring, and then you got to like transition it to execute it against the tougher guys, or like, So we have like a system. Like Forrest will do it on the pads with me. Then I'll go to the bag and I'll try to work whatever we're working on. Then we have drills in place. Like we do like partner drills, and we try to fix those things in the partner drills. Then we take it to sparring, and then we'll take it to like the higher level sparring, like against like the very good fighters, and you're just trying to like those guys you're basically trying to win the round against, right? And then
Yeah.
as long as you got to develop the skills from the grassroots and take it one step at a time. You can't just like rush right into something, or else like it's not going to work, or you're going to pay for it not working.
Yeah, well said. Now, when are you looking next? When's the next fight? When are you guys shaping up to get 2023 kind of rolling for you?
Yeah. My next fight, I think I got it lined up. It's going to be on March 11th in
And
Brampton.
in Brampton, nice.
Yeah.
And can you just let everybody know where they can kind of find you? Because I know you also do. He also does personal training. He also trains people as well. Where they can kind of reach out to you if they want to kind of work with you and kind of keep up with your career and all that kind of stuff. Where can
For
everybody
sure.
find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Mathusan13, Mathusan 13. You can add me on Facebook with the same name. I'm on all platforms, but I mostly just use Instagram because that's what everyone's using.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing this. And you know what? I've been watching you since you were very, very young in amateurs, and it's like for me as I call myself an old guy. I know I'm not that old, but for me, it makes me very happy to see your success going on right now. And I wish you nothing but the best, brother. And I see big things for you. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep plugging away. And you're definitely. I have no doubt that you're gonna fucking do big things. And
Yeah.
80 fights, man. You're a seasoned vet, so I'm looking forward to watching you beat some shit out of some guys and being the first Tamil champ, bro.
Thank you. I have to give you a big shout out because when I first you were there, like when I first started boxing, like in my first year of boxing, you and Saj were always in the gym, and just to find out there was like other brown professional fighters, because at that time you were turning professional, and
Yeah,
Saj was already like he was like pro, and he was like stopped at that time, but I was just like, you know what, to see there's even professional athletes like the same skin color as me, and because the only guys you see are like they don't you kind of don't relate to them the same.
yeah.
So I was
I know
fortunate
you.
to have you guys there.
I know what you mean. And it's funny, but it's hard. Like I say this, and I'm not being like discriminatory towards my own people, but like, there's not brown people don't do shit. We drive Ubers and do math and answer fucking call centers. Like I'm being stereotypical here, but I don't give a fuck. Like, like, like when you go to a family function, like that's what brown people do, and we're cool with that. We're doctors, we're fucking lawyers, we do that kind of shit. You don't see many of it, but you know what it is? It's a mindset, bro. Like I've never seen it as a skin color thing. To be honest with you, I just like I've always like when I was a young kid, I was always like I wanted to be a professional athlete. But like when you grow up in the kind of homes that we do, it's not prioritized thing, right? And
Mhm.
fighting for me was like I didn't even think about that. Like I didn't think I was like when I was a kid, I was like I want to play basketball. I want to do like I want to those kind of things. For me, it was the for me fighting became like I thought I was like when I started doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and that's where I started fighting. I wanted to pursue professional fighting because I view it as it's probably one of the hardest things in the world to do. Combat sports at all level, and even as I'm getting older and I transition into other things in life, and like right now I'm really focused on business and doing all these other fun things like podcasts and all that stuff. I always bring it back. I always say people they're like, you know, I always relate this when when you have a day where you just things just keep hitting you in the fucking face. You're like, this bill comes, you get pulled over, this your car breaks, all the shit can go wrong. I always related back to this. There's nothing worse in life to me than being absolutely exhausted, my muscles cramping, being full mounted, and getting beat the fuck in my face. And I've been there. We've all been there. You can relate to positions in boxing where you're being there where you can't even keep your hands up. You're getting fucking smoked. You can't see shit. You're about to die. You know what I mean? And finally, the bell saves you, and you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, right? To me, that's the worst place. I've put myself there so many times. There's nothing worse than that for me. So when those situations in life happen, I'm like, whatever. There's nothing worse than that. I can deal with this. And that's what fighting has given me. I know like we're brown and that's fucking cool, but for me, fighting was that. It was the hardest thing I could think of. And I'm like, when I get old, I'm gonna look back on this and I'll be like, yo, that was some hard shit, and I did it, right?
Yo, I feel the 100% the same way throughout like my whole life. Like anything, something bad comes, I'm like, man, this is nothing compared to a guy on the other side of the ring trying to kill you. Like
Exactly.
nothing will ever, and not a lot of people can relate to that.
No.
That's why it's always a brotherhood between fighters, and it's always amazing to see
Well,
what other fighters do and how everything's going for them.
all right, man. Well, I'm definitely cheering you on, and like I said, I'm proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep winning, and we're definitely gonna keep looking at your career, and we're definitely definitely see belts in your future. So, thank you for doing this, man. Thank you for taking the time, and that's it for Mathusan, the Tiger.
Hey everybody, thank you for watching and listening to the Grinds My Gears podcast. Please head over to Spotify, make sure you like and subscribe, as well as head over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the like on the video as well, and head over to gmg-podcast.com to get all up-to-date info on the podcast as well as other special things that we have on that website.